A woman is dead. A shooting in Minneapolis by an ICE agent has sparked national outrage. But there's something about this story that isn't being told. What if everything you've heard is just the surface? What if the truth runs much deeper than a simple immigration operation gone wrong? This isn't just about one agent or one death. This is about a criminal network, years in the making, operating in plain sight, hidden within the very systems meant to protect us. What began as an immigration sweep quickly spiraled into something much darker. And it's not just Minneapolis that's at risk. This has been spreading across the country, unchecked until now. But here's the twist. Nobody is saying out loud, this is only the beginning. Stick around because the story flips right here. It all started with an immigration raid. ICE agents stormed a hotel in South Minneapolis expecting to find illegal immigrants. But they uncovered something far worse, a sprawling criminal network hidden right under the city's nose. What began as a standard immigration enforcement operation quickly escalated into something much bigger, much more dangerous. The raid revealed forged passports, stacks of cash, and weapons hidden in maintenance rooms. But what the agents found next would send shockwaves. 39 firearms, including loaded pistols and assault rifles, and tons of drugs hidden away for distribution, not personal use. In less than 45 minutes, over 230 illegal immigrants were detained, many of them Somali nationals, but that was only the beginning. So here's the big question. How did something this massive operate under the radar for so long? What else is being covered up? As the dust settled, it became clear that what ICE uncovered wasn't just a trafficking operation. It was the tip of an iceberg. The agents started piecing together a story that stretched far beyond immigration. They discovered something that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The network at the center of it all had been shielded for years by key figures, including a Somali-born judge and an attorney with a spotless public record. Imagine this. Trusted officials, people who should have been upholding the law, were actually helping orchestrate the smuggling, forging identities, and trafficking drugs. But the real bombshell came when investigators linked the network to at least 24 gang-related deaths. Homicides that were originally dismissed as random crime were, in fact, part of a much larger conspiracy. Notice what's missing? How did so many lives get lost, and why did it take this long for anyone to notice? As the investigation dug deeper, the scale of the operation became even more disturbing. What began as a simple immigration raid morphed into a massive multi-state drug cartel conspiracy. This wasn't just about illegal immigration. It was about a sophisticated underground network operating in plain sight. The network's reach was chilling. Federal agents quickly realized the city wasn't just facing a few criminals. It was facing a full-blown criminal empire embedded in the very institutions that were supposed to protect the public. And it didn't stop there. The corruption had gone so deep that it was clear this operation wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a much larger systemic problem. The network thrived on a culture of silence and complacency. In fact, local law enforcement was turning a blind eye, with some even being paid off to protect the cartel's interests. Now, let me ask you, how could something this big happen right under our noses? And who exactly was protecting it? The deeper investigators went, the darker things became. Evidence uncovered from the hotel raid pointed directly to two high-profile figures, Khalif Nourelmi, a Somali-born judge with an unblemished public record, and Hoden Ella Noor, a licensed attorney in Minneapolis. On the surface, they seemed like pillars of the community. In reality, they were the architects of a criminal pipeline, building it over nearly a decade. But here's where the story flips. They weren't just small-time criminals. They had built a vast network, bringing Somali migrants into the U.S., using false identities and recruiting them into dangerous roles, drivers, stash house guards, couriers, all held together by threats, debts, and family pressure abroad. This wasn't street crime. This was organized crime, and it had the highest level of protection possible. And here's the kicker. They used their positions of power to protect themselves. Court delays, legal filings that stalled investigations, even bribes to senior law enforcement figures, it all helped the network stay in the shadows. This wasn't just a criminal operation. It was a systematic abuse of the legal system. As the investigation tightened, things began to unravel quickly. The arrests of Khalif and Hoden were just the start. Once federal agents locked them down at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, everything changed. The network lost its shield. Within hours, prosecutors had expanded their warrants. Names, numbers, and connections previously buried for years came to light in a flood. And then the real work began. Federal agents began digging through financial records, encrypted phones, and burner devices recovered from the raid. What they discovered was horrifying. The network wasn't just confined to Minneapolis. It had spread across 6 states with a trail of drugs, money, and violence that spanned the entire Midwest. But what happens if this continues? This operation is far from over. And what they're uncovering is shaking the very foundation of law enforcement and public trust. Now, let's shift the focus to you, the viewer, because this isn't just about law enforcement or criminals. It's about the real-world consequences of this operation on ordinary people. You've seen the headlines. But have you thought about the lives behind them? Families, communities, and entire neighborhoods are being torn apart by this network. Overdose deaths spiked in key Minnesota counties. Some areas saw fatalities increase by over 300% in just 3 years. That's not a statistic. It's a mother losing her child, a neighborhood gripped by fear. The violence followed the drugs. Homicides increased. Armed robberies became routine. Even everyday life in Minneapolis was marked by a constant undercurrent of tension and danger. And the people caught in this web, migrants forced into the system, trapped by debts they couldn't pay, pressured by threats against their families back home. They didn't have a choice. Cooperation wasn't voluntary. It was survival. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments. But there's a bigger truth here, something that's not being talked about enough: the system itself. How does something like this happen, and why does it take so long to expose? The answer lies in the very mechanism that allowed this network to thrive: corruption. It's not just about criminal organizations operating in the shadows. It's about how power, when unchecked, can protect these criminals. Think about it. Corrupt officials, lawyers, judges, law enforcement, they didn't just overlook the network, they enabled it. This wasn't random. It was a systematic erosion of the system's integrity. From bribery to delayed warrants to entire agencies ignoring the truth, this network didn't just survive. It thrived in plain sight because no one was watching. And here's the unsettling insight. The network didn't rely just on drugs or violence. It relied on the silence, the complacency, the belief that the system was immune to corruption. It wasn't. It isn't. And now we see the price we've paid. Now the big question: what happens next? The immediate fallout has been massive. Federal agencies are taking unprecedented steps to ensure this network can't regenerate. But what about the future? The problem isn't just the cartel. It's the environment that allowed it to grow in the first place. And that's where things get uncertain. On one hand, we could see more sweeping reforms: new oversight, better data sharing, and joint task forces between local and federal agencies. Transparency could become the new norm, and corruption could be a thing of the past. But there's another path, one where this operation is treated as a one-off, an isolated incident, where the fixes are temporary and the same vulnerabilities remain. What's clear is this: the next move is already being made, and whether it leads to long-term change or just another Band-Aid solution is still in play. In the end, it all comes down to one undeniable truth: when the system fails, the cost is staggering. This was never just about crime. It was about how deeply corruption can infiltrate institutions meant to protect us. What began with a single gunshot, a shooting that sparked outrage, unraveled a network so deeply embedded that it took years to expose. But in the weeks after the raids, Minneapolis began to change. No, it wasn't fixed overnight, but something fundamental shifted. The belief that power could shield the guilty, that corruption could go unnoticed, those myths crumbled. The reckoning had begun, and for the first time in a long time, accountability became the only currency that mattered. The question now is, what about the next time? Because the conditions that let this happen again are still there, and they always will be, until we refuse to accept silence as normal. If you believe justice belongs to everyone, no matter their title, hit like. And if you think it's time we hold the powerful accountable, share this story so the warning doesn't fade.